Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sales Uncharted. Now, those who know me that I get hyper excited when I have some very unique characters, people, individuals on this session. So, today's guest is John Kitsmiller. John and I actually bumped into each other because I was a buyer and John was a seller. And I think we had a great conversation. Since then, John actually moved on and has started his own entrepreneurial venture. And I have a soft spot for how do you say this, entrepreneurs. I call them adventurers actually. I'm one of those. And I know how important it is to get your voice heard. John comes with a depth of understanding about government, technology, GTM, long sales cycles, deals. John, before we get going, sir, would you take a minute or two and kind of tell the audience your background, what chops do you bring to the table, what pain do you solve for people, and why should we listen to you, John? Actually, yeah, why should we listen to you, John? Tell me.
Yeah, wow, background. That's quite a story. So I started my career, I guess I would call it my real first career, back in the mid '90s. I got recruited by Microsoft, luckily,
Hmm.
and I spent 7 years there. Made it through Y2K and the internet bubble and all those things. Um, and that's where I hit my first time selling to government was as an account executive for large government agencies and of all places, Minnesota and North Dakota. And so they moved me up there. Wound up going from Microsoft to Dell, same account set, doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Really glad I went there. Met my wife there, and now we've been married 22 years almost. Um, but I wound up leaving Dell to make a move back to Austin, where my wife's from. And being in government, it's an interesting thing. You once you start selling to government and you kind of get what I would call the stomach for it, because you mentioned the
Yes.
long sales cycles and all the
Yeah.
kind of craziness with procurement and everything like that, you sort of get tagged for that, and it's a double edged sword, right? It's good
Definitely.
because you become a bit of a commodity or a non commodity because not a lot of people either know how to
Can,
sell to government or even
yeah.
want to sell to government.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you ever want to get out, it's really hard to go back to corporate sort of B2B stuff because you've suddenly lost all the that kind of experience. But I did 20 years of doing GovTech or B2G, as many people call it, mostly in justice and public safety. So, starting with public safety, so law enforcement for the most part. And then I did
Yeah.
some selling in courts. And then I wound up for 8 years. I wound up managing sales, marketing, and go to market for a company selling to prosecutors. And talk about a niche within a niche.
That's niche within a
Um,
niche. I was about to mention that.
yeah,
Yeah, that sounds really.
it's yeah. And so I spent a lot of time with elected, folks and procurement and everybody in between. So it's been fun and I love it. And so we've had some life changes for us, making a move and doing some other things. And took some time off last year to kind of decide what in the heck do I really want to do long term at this point
Yeah.
with the changes going on. And when I was doing that, selling to prosecutors, I loved sort of that marketing and figuring out how to take the product to market and the outbound part of it and everything that kind of goes into what most people call go to market. And so I decided there's not a lot of people when I did the research that are in go to market for GovTech specifically. And yeah, so I chose that. A lot of people called me, excuse my language, batshit crazy. Because it's a small TAM, right? There's
It's
not a
it's
lot
it's
of
a small TAM. I
fast.
would agree with you. In fact,
Yeah,
my first reaction, to be honest with you, John, was why would John choose something so thin and slivery? Because we
yeah,
have this notion in our mind, right, that the bigger the target, the better chance of hitting something, right? And I think
that's what most say. Yeah,
if I follow your thought process, and if I look at your background, John, I would say to you, anyone listening in right now, after 22, 20 years of your, what, more, because you've only been married 22 years, but you've been working for longer than that. So three
yeah,
decades of effort and with such a highly specialized niche upon niche, I think there's some really interesting conversations you and I are going to have on this podcast. I can just sense it right now. I'm going to start off with my biggest group of people that used to irritate me the most when I was in enterprise sales. And I want to be very cautious because I love procurement, right? We all love procurement departments, right? So now, John, you most likely have to figure out a relationship or a mechanism with these guys, right? Could you
oh
kind
yeah.
of walk me through? And I'm going to take two angles to it, right? One is an established team that's enterprise sellers. They are kind of there. Then you also have these founders, right? And I just want to
Yeah.
understand, your ICP, is it founders or is it established organization? You're attacking both?
No, interestingly enough, that's another sort of a thing that I really niched down on, and that was I really I have a passion for small SaaS companies.
Got it.
I
Yeah.
think they don't tend to have. Well, let me get back up a little bit on that because I think it's important to kind of think about this. What I've run into most are small GovTech SaaS companies. It tends to be a founder that came from within whatever agency he's now serving, right? So I've
Yes.
got a client that used to be a cop and realized a problem with prosecutors being able to serve subpoenas to cops because that's who they subpoena most, right? There are always cops involved in a
Yep.
case and it goes to trial and they have to subpoena them. But it's really hard to find those cops when they need to serve a piece of paper. So he was a cop, realized it. So now you've got a founder that has never been a salesperson, definitely not, educated, if you will, and go to market, but has a great product and there's a need for it in the market. And
Yeah.
they are founder led sales for a period of time, but kind of get through it the best they can. Then they tend to also hire salespeople when they get to that point
True
that
that. Yeah.
also came from within the agencies, right? And now you've got folks that really aren't sort of savvy with marketing or go to market, sort of struggling and sort of hitting a ceiling at some point that they just can't
Yeah.
kind of get past. And that's who I want to help. I don't want to go after big companies, not because they might have their own go to market, but I seriously just have a passion
Got
for
it.
those companies that sort of don't have the resources
And, and
otherwise.
and I
And
think
so,
this is an important
yeah,
conversation for me because now at least it gives me some boundaries in which I'd like to pursue this, right? So if I were to, let's pick on a founder now. One of my clients actually is in defense, and you're right. Came
yeah,
out from that defense environment, decided to build a software out of it, and they just crossed $10 million in annual sales. And the conversation I was having with them was, and that made me actually realize, when you're sitting inside looking outwards, you have a different feel for things. Now that you're founder, you lead with your idea and you realize the idea is not good enough. You need to sell it, you need to position it. And that's a
yeah,
huge mind shift, right? Let's first
very.
start with founders. What mind shift does a founder need to have when starting to deal with procurement? And if he happens to come from inside and then going from outside, I'm sure there must be some challenges. So, John, what advice would you give to someone on procurement and how you need to take it in stride, to put it crudely?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest kind of things, especially as you called it, sort of, going from the inside looking out, now outside looking in,
Mm.
is from the inside, you don't have to deal with procurement. You don't really understand how important they necessarily are. There's some process for an agency buying stuff, but you don't really understand how complicated that process is. And in government, what I tend to find people don't necessarily understand is the strictness of procurement rules in government.
Yes.
Agencies get a single budget once a year. There's no, hey, let's sell some more stuff so that we can have more budget. There's no, let's, do any of these crazy things. You get it one time. And so one of the things I try and, kind of help founders with is, hey, instead of chasing every agency you possibly could, you really need to get in line with what their budget cycle is. And most of them want to sell in different states. And what you'll find is you would think there's some standard for budget cycles, but there's not. Different states,
That's a very
even
important
different,
point. Yes.
yeah, different states, different counties, even within a state, they have their own fiscal year that might be different. Some start in January, some start in July, some start in October. And if you've really got to get in at the right time within that budget cycle, because if you're a month before the budget cycle, chances
Ye-
are their
Yeah.
budget was approved 3 months ago and they're not going to be able to do anything for another year potentially.
But John, let's come. But John, I still want to talk about the procurement angle a bit more. So the budget
Yeah.
cycle is critical. What about behavior? What about
Mm.
relationships? How would you kind of shed light on that?
Yeah, I mean, you really need to understand the internals. I mean, who is the procurement manager or, whatever person they have in charge of procurement, and understand kind of what their process is internally. When our budget's approved, is there going to have to be an RFP? Is there a threshold before something has to go to RFP? Because that's, again, it's another, it sounds like a little thing, but it could mean the difference in selling something today and selling something in a year from now.
Yeah.
Because if you can find a way, I hate to say beat the system, but you kind of are. If you can get it under that procurement threshold or that RFP threshold, you suddenly skip
Yeah.
an entire part that is
Or
complicated. And I'll tell you, nobody in the agency wants to do an RFP, and no vendor wants to answer an RFP. It's complicated. It takes a long time.
yeah.
And so if you can find a way, to sort of understand that procurement rules within that agency, that's gold for you. And part of that is meeting with procurement, even if your champion is, let's say, the elected prosecutor that you're selling to, making sure that you're introduced to procurement so that they can help you navigate the procurement rules within their agency.
So, John, if I would ask you, you would say that if you're a founder and you are picking an agency to work with, understanding the lay of the land, a great place to start is actually understanding who is procurement, what is procurement, how powerful is procurement. Now, you used the word there, John, champion, right? When you use the word
Yeah.
champion, John, based on your background in history, how do you define a champion, though? I'm just trying to make sure the founders on the call kind of, because some people say that champion is a coach or a coach is a champion. And I always get back and forth. I have a definition of champion. I'm just curious about your definition.
Yeah, I think you kind of said it right. I mean, I think the champion is the person that wants your software and is willing to sort of help
I
navigate
like that
you.
definition. I like that. Yes.
Yeah, somebody that's going to help you navigate the agency, introduce you to the right people, champion, if you will, that yours is the right product for what they want to do, and things like that. I mean, if you don't have anybody sort of fighting for you, it's a much more difficult, because one of the things
it is.
yeah,
One
I
of the
mean,
things
and
that,
I think something unique in government that plays into that, I mentioned introducing you to the right people. In government especially, I've never been part of an opportunity that was not a committee buy.
got it.
In B2B, there often is some
Yes,
person at
agreed.
the end of the day that's going to sign off on it.
Yeah,
I've
agreed.
had deals in agencies that have 12 stakeholders, and at the end of the day, any single one of them can kill your deal, because every
Yeah.
one of them is involved and every one of them has some opinion, whether that's IT or one of somebody from 10 different departments within an agency.
So, John, I'm a founder. I'm listening to you. Clearly, you've given us some homework to do. Figure out the lay of the land, find your champion, use your champion to understand your procurement potentially, use the champion to identify which rooms are you not present in and how can the champion support you in those rooms where you're not present in, right? John, I have a question for you. Now, a lot of the guys listening in, right? They come from a how do you say this, non-selling background. They've got a product, they got an idea. Now they actually go around and they don't know. So you and I would typically ask simple questions like, do they have a budget? You're looking for some evidence from me that tells you that I understand the selling process. These guys typically don't. And when they lose a deal, they don't are not able to understand it until someone puts a mirror up to them to show them what
Right.
went wrong. If you look at your own background and your history working with people, what caution would you give to founders? What are the three tells that you actually are about to lose a deal without realizing it? What would those tells look like?
I mean, one is you don't have any idea what their procurement schedule is or procurement rules. They've
Oh,
not introduced you
that's a
to
simple one.
other
You're right.
stakeholders. I mean, if they haven't introduced you to the people that are going to have some say in your deal, you're sunk, because nobody else is going to know.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, John. Very early in my career, I remember sitting in a review, and one of the senior guys said, "When do you think you're going to bring this in?" And he says, "I'm expecting to book it by the end of this month." And to the boss said, "End of month is 2 weeks from now." And the guy says, "Yeah, we've got that this." Then he just asked him a simple question: "Hey, this is the account there, right? Have you met the Dr. Roy?" And he says, "Sorry, what's the question?" He says, "He's the guy that signs the check, man." Have you met
Yeah,
and
who's
have you
Dr.
guys
Roy?
got
Yeah,
to his desk yet? Has he asked you any questions? And he says, no. He says, I assure you, if you haven't got to his desk, he's going to ask questions that are going to take not 2 weeks, may take 2 months to get answers to, because he's not going to sign this because he's going to ask a lot of questions. So he was said to us, guys, what I need you guys to do is that make sure that when you come to me with the evidence that you're progressing, to make sure that is actually the accurate proxy for what's really happening.
yeah,
Stop using internal language also. And that's something, John, I'm going to come to you later on, right? That when you're talking with in a very complex mechanical systematic system, a lot of guys tend to use language which is internal. I'm in
oh
sales
my
stage
gosh,
1, I'm in sales stage 2, and I
yeah.
always freak out when I hear a guy in government talking like that, because it
Well,
reflects.
let me add something to that I've
Yeah.
seen constantly is demos that are feature rich. If you're
Oh
not doing a
yes,
demo that is specific to the person you're doing the demo for, they don't care about every single feature.
I'm with you.
And I was just one of my clients, he told me right when we started working together that they do all these demos and it's an hour long, and I'm like, how could it be an hour long? If you're not
You
showing the person in 10 minutes how they're going to use it and how it's going to benefit them, they've tuned out. And if it's remote, they're probably on their phone, they're doing email. You have no idea what they're doing, but they're not listening anymore.
know, the funny thing is that when I became an entrepreneur, I actually realized that I had fallen in love with my product, because now I'm a sales guy. And when
Yeah.
you fall in love with your product, because it's existential for you, right? Your product, your service is you. And I've realized that that's a huge challenge for a lot of founders. And what was really surprising is the point you just made, is that it's not just GovTech or long cycles, right? I have seen people, small SaaS, organizations, counting the amount of demos they do as a proxy for
Oh
movement.
my gosh.
And then
Yeah.
I watch these guys now, and then to do a demo, the guys actually go and set up demos, taking so much time and effort, only to realize afterwards that when I see the demo, I'm like, guys, all you did was change the name from Sheila to Mika, and you changed the title, and then you said instead of financial services, you now made it is a goat herder on the eastern slopes of Slovenia. And I'm like, but
Yeah.
where did you customize it to actually tell the guy, I've understood your pain points and I'm going to show you how I'll resolve your pain points, rather than going through we first open the door, then we put the key, then we put the doorknob, then we get the goat. What are you doing? The guy is a vegan. He's not interested in goat meat or anything like that. So this has been something that I've noticed with founders. They love going to the demo because they
Well,
are
they love their
so comfortable.
product.
They love their product. You nailed it. That's the word I couldn't figure out.
Yeah.
They love their product. I mean, I
Yeah.
suddenly realized their proxy or their measurement is go to the safest place, and the safe place is the vantage point is a demo. And I
Yep.
cannot tell you how much damage you cause when you walk into a room with no discovery, no understanding, you don't customize it, and you start talking because for some reason, if I build it, if I demo it, they will come. And I'm sorry to Mr. Costner, Kevin Costner, but darn it, he actually spoiled us with that movie, Field of
Yeah.
Dreams, wasn't
Well,
it? Yeah.
I shared this acronym with you before, and it's one that I've used forever, and it's called WIFM. And it's WIIFM. And what it is what's in it for me. And anybody you're talking to, that's all they
Yeah.
care about. They
Yeah.
don't care. I mean, it's one of the things is very early anytime I'm working with a client is the personas. And again, I talked about within a government agency, it's a big list of
It's,
people you have to be
yes.
sort of involved with. And again, if I go back to selling to prosecutors, I mean, I did that for a long time. Um, Somebody would ask, well, who's the decision maker? And I'm like, oh, wait, within a prosecutor's office, you've got an elected prosecutor. What does he care about? Well, he cares about getting reelected, and he cares about being able to tell the community that he's keeping it safer. He's got managing attorneys. Guess what?
Yeah.
They're worried about their attorneys doing their job. You've got attorneys that are actually going to trial. They've got something totally different. IT's got some other thing that they care about. Everybody's got a different with them. And when you're talking to someone, you need to be able, in a demo, for example, in 10 minutes, you should be able to show them what they care about. Don't show them everything. All you're doing is muddying the waters.
But John, let me pull your experience into this for 1 second, right? What you and I talking about is slightly downstream, right? Let me pull you up a little bit and ask
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
for someone to identify with him, I love the way you pronounced it, with him. It's like one of those Shazam, with him. So you do the with him thing. When do you do it? How do you do it? And is this part of discovery or not? How do you define it from your perspective?
Oh, it has to be done through discovery. I mean, you have to have a conversation with the person to understand what is, I mean, it's such an overused term, but what is their pain? Right? And it's not just their
Yeah.
pain. Everybody here's the other, this is the way I've tried to reframe it. Everybody wants to be a hero. And what's it going to
Yes.
take to make that person the hero of the story? And
Correct.
what's important to them? Because again, I had to work with, no, I shouldn't say I had to. I got to work with a lot of elected
Yeah.
officials. And
Yeah.
guess what? That is one of the most, they're always thinking about, what do I have to do for my community that when it comes time to get reelected, they're going to vote for me? That's
But
what they care about, right?
that's what, but John, there's something you said that I want to latch on to because I really want the listeners to zone in here a bit. So you're right. We talk about pain, and I see the salespeople getting that glazed look in their eyes. Why? Because some of them think they've understood the pain, but they don't dig deep enough and then complain that they never got the right answer.
Yeah.
Or they hear a pain and they go off on a tangent because they don't know what this pain is going to. Or they hear pain and they just jump onto it without actually holding back and listening. I used to be one of those guys. 2:1 is something I didn't understand. But John, let me ask you a question on this pain discovery process, right? I do the discovery, I do the pain. Now I'm trying to understand what language do we need to now convert this back into. And there's something you said which triggered a thought in my mind. You said find out what is in it for that person, but then the example you gave was of a personal agenda. And I was very
Yeah.
surprised when you said that, because I believe honestly that the top rockstar salespeople balance two objectives. One is deliver what the organization wants, what procurement wants, but they also look very carefully at what's in it for that person specifically. Is it his re-election, as you said? Is it that his last project was an utter failure and everyone's watching him and nodding their heads that this guy ain't gonna,
Yeah.
he wants success, right? So if you can de-risk it and position it, then this guy gets excited. So I would spot on agree with you. And I don't think this is a unique to long sales cycle deals. I think this is something that anyone
Oh,
working in
totally
sales can
agree.
take and learn
It's
from.
human nature. It's
It's
human
human
nature.
nature.
Yeah.
John, there's something else you said about, people like to talk about themselves. People like to get their own objectives met. What's the best conversation icebreaker that you've used? Are you a golfer? Do you use those cliches, golfing cliches, or do you kind of connect in a very different way with your customers, particularly in these agencies which are highly complex?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to go in with sort of that knowledge of understanding from time, right? I mean, that's
Mm.
my benefit, right? Is I've worked with a lot of government agencies and I understand what drives an elected official. I understand what drives an IT person. It's
Yep.
different. I mean, it's unfortunate to some degree, but in government agencies, often it is CYA, right? Because
Yeah.
they, and the other thing that I think is different from B2B is they're not driving income. They're not driving revenue. That is not
Definitely.
something they care about. Now, what they care about is saving time, making
Yes.
citizens happy, because ultimately in an agency, that's who they're serving, right? They're the citizens
The
of their
people, the,
community.
the taxpayers, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So, John, I'm a founder. I'm listening to you, getting all these ideas. I'm also a new founder. I don't have any salesperson working for me. And there's a reason why I'm saying that. John, my bandwidth is sucked. I'm worried about my cash flow. I'm busy doing some other work. I don't have finite amount of time. Now along comes these two, three fat, juicy deals, right? One comes from a medium sized agency. One comes from a small agency. One comes from this monster that if I get this, I'm going to be set for 2 years. John, is there a framework or is there some tips or tricks that you typically would offer to a founder to evaluate a situation like that before walking into a perennial trap? And is there any notion that one of these is better than the other?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, chase small ones first. There's a couple reasons. One is procurement is way simpler. Don't
Oh, yeah,
don't
you're
get
right. You're
don't
right.
get sucked into an ego thing, right? Yes, the city of New York would be an amazing win, and you could talk about it forever. but the amount of time it takes to get through procurement in a city like New York, as opposed to my little city of Taylor with 15,000 people,
Yeah.
it's day and night. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter, because it's funny. I did this calculation somewhat recently for someone, and I did it for counties. And they said, well, how many of those big counties are there? So there's about 3,100 counties in the United States. Do you know
Yes.
how many of them fall under 25,000 population?
Oh, if this is the US, more than 50%.
Oh, it's like 2,100 of the 3,100 are under
So
50,000
60,
people.
two-thirds is small.
Yeah,
Yes,
two-thirds of them are
yes.
very small.
I kind of, the reason why I say that is because whenever I'm on the roads, right, and I come from India and South Africa and other places in Singapore, one of the things I really notice is that Americans are very proud of putting up signs that say Louisville, 25,000, and then
Yeah.
someone writes there +6 this weekend, right? You go to India, and when you drive, you're asking everyone, guys, where does humanity end here? Because there's just person after person after person after person.
Yeah.
I was telling someone that I was born in a third tier city, and he said, how big is it? I said, 1.5 million people. That's
Yeah.
a tier 3 city. So when
Yeah.
you threw that stat at me, it's an important stat. But of course, the economic power from that 25,000 people is far different from what you would have from 1.5 million. So, and I think that's where the fun starts. You may
Well,
have
and
this
and I
small procurement, but there's gold there to be found as well, I guess, right?
well, and one of the things I've learned is that it's really sort of an interesting thing, and it still to this day doesn't always make sense to me. But
Yeah.
every state it's almost a nation unto itself, because you can go into a state, and you can go to an agency and say, hey, we've got this other agency in another state, and they're like, yeah, I don't care. All they care about is somebody in their state. So I always tell people, get a beachhead with a small city in that state, and that's where you start, because then you can go to
Smart.
someone else and say, hey, I've already got somebody in your state. Regulation is the same. Often the procurement rules will be the
Yeah,
same
I've
because
cut my
they're set
teeth.
at a
Yeah.
state
Yeah,
level.
that makes sense.
And so you just find a small agency, and get them to start with the proof of concept. Get them to say, yeah, they've proven it out here, and
Right.
I can sort of vouch that they can work in our state.
No, but John, that's actually a very big tip that you just slid in there very quietly and subtly, right? Which is beachheads. And if I think about it, any salesperson listening needs to understand. If you're in an account and you're just breaking into it, take whatever comes, build on that, and then build your reputation and just expand. And
Yeah.
it's perfect. I think that's one of the reasons why we operate the way we do. So I'm going to kind of flip this a bit here. Let's talk
Yeah.
about a bit about budgets and stuff, right? So, John, digging into your background and stuff. So, if I'm a newbie and I want to get into GovTech, or I'm already in GovTech and I'm kind of like learn the stuff and the ropes, how exactly do government budget cycles work in practice? I mean, some general rules that you could share with us. Kind of, it's an education for me as well.
Yeah. So again, I kind of mentioned it earlier. They get one budget a year. I think it's important to understand I think a lot of people sort of miss the part of how each department or each agency within a city, a county, a state, how they sort of go about getting their budget. So there's a point 3, 4, 5 months before the budget is finalized. Every
Yeah,
department has to come to a budget meeting of some sort and say, these are the things we want, and this is the budget I need to do that. But
yeah,
what a lot of people don't understand, they don't even think about this, is their agencies or the departments that they're working with are fighting against every single other agency within
for the
that city,
same
county, state.
bucket in the budget. Is
The
that how I?
same bucket.
Yeah,
And you got to consider it is a limited bucket, because what is the revenue, if you will, for a city, county, state? It's tax dollars,
it's tax.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so I get this all the time, like, well, it's a $200,000 thing. Well, now you've got to go, okay, so if the city's budget is X, what percentage of the entire budget is your project? And if it's a large percentage, that means they're
That's
fighting really hard against the other ones. And I tell people all the time, they never believe this. And you're a citizen in some city, county, everybody is, right? And if you were to stop and think about it, what's the thing that people complain about the most in your city?
where my
Roads.
tax dollars are being spent.
Well, but the roads. Everybody
The roads,
hates.
yes, why not? Either
Yep.
I don't have enough buses, or I have bad quality
Yep.
roads, or
Transportation.
transportation, basic stuff. It's always the basic
And so
stuff.
now you take all of that part of the budget and it's gone. And now every single department within the city is fighting for what's left over. And they're fighting, trust me, they have to prove it
They have to,
that they're
yeah.
worth it. And you got to think about your pricing and how that fits into how difficult is it going to be to get that into the budget. And then you've got to be ready for a way to, are you going to require enough RFP, or are you smart enough to get under that threshold? Right. One thing that was always helpful too is understand grants that are available. Government agencies rely heavily on grants that are available for all sorts of things. And if you're selling to government, you've got to get familiar with something called SAM. It's easy to go to sam.gov. It lists every grant, who the department within, typically feds, what the federal office is or division that is giving out the grant, what the requirements of the grant are. And it's likely somewhere there are grants available for the software that you're selling. So now get familiar with those grants and what are required within those grants, that maybe your agency can get a grant for what you're selling if they can't get it in the budget.
So if I understand you, John, what you've actually done is, so there's a timing thing. You need to understand how budget cycles work. You intercept that budget cycle. If you see that it's this point, then you need to understand the discussion most likely started 3 or 4 months ago. You got intercepted. Start small, beachhead, grow from there. And then I'm just trying to figure out here. I do this. What else can I still get wrong though in this entire sales cycle? What else could go wrong besides those items there? I've captured all that. I've got my champion. I've laid it down. Anything that you feel we haven't discussed that could be something caution, here be danger?
Yeah, there's one big thing actually. Contracts. Oh my gosh. Every government agency has a contract, and it literally can, I'm not even joking, get your contract in front of somebody way early. I mean, it literally could take months to negotiate, because there's all kinds of unique things in a government contract that you would never see anywhere else. I'll give you a perfect example that you won't see anywhere else, and that is something called non-appropriations language. And what that means is a government agency cannot commit dollars to the budget in years coming up. They can't. It's not
They can't, because there's no rollover. So it's every time.
Right.
There's
no rollover. Yeah. They don't get to say, I'm going to roll this money from one year to the next. And so you've got to be prepared when they push back. And so, hey, look, there's got to be language in the contract that says, if our budget is not approved, we cancel the contract with you. I don't care if it's a 5-year contract.
Yeah.
So government contracts can be tricky. So be prepared. Get your contract in front of whoever the contract authority is. Some attorney is going to review it. Get them to review it early from your champion. It's another one of those relationships they need to introduce you to whoever is handling contracts there.
John, I'm going to digress a bit here, because there's something you said that I really want to latch on to. John, I have been in sales operations and sales in 4 different continents, right? Let me tell you the one thing that scares people the most, and you may not have heard about it, but it is bribery and the perception of underhand stuff. It happens all the time, right? One of the biggest challenges I faced when I was in sales and dealing with salespeople was the fact that they actually don't know that what they're saying sometimes is like a side letter or side arrangement. So you also have a customer saying, I want the most favored customer clause, right? That the price you offer to me is the best price that I will always get the best price. And if you offer another customer the same price, you will come back and give me that price going forward and compensate me for a salesperson. That's like, yeah, but that won't happen, Deepak. I'm like, what do you mean? No, it won't happen, because how will they know that? I'm like, what are you talking about? The day your price is published to someone, and if that is also a government agency, they will know because it's going to be
Well,
published.
that's the thing to remember about government contracts. They're all public information. Anybody, a competitor, the public, anybody can request a copy of that contract. Anybody.
Yes. But John, the reason why I asked the question though was that you've been in this game long enough to keep your, how do you say, self out of trouble, correct? Because it's
Yeah.
very easy to get it. John, if you were to look at a couple of principles and a couple of gotchas, watch out, because this is where typically, and I'm not asking you to step into the shoes of a culturally different domain of setting like India or at African countries and stuff, right? But you've heard the stories, you've heard
Yeah.
that there's a lot of stuff, and particularly in government, where to win the favor of a government official, it is known as let's take some bribes, let's take some money, let's do whatever. So, have you come across situations where you have felt that your integrity was put to risk? And what would you recommend to people to do to watch out for signs where you're being told or are yourself are walking into a trap? Is there any guidance you could think of there? And I'm not putting you in any position
Yeah.
here. I just want to really hear from you.
No, I mean, honestly, integrity wise, that's been an important part of me just personally. You know, I've said something in my entire career, I think, in selling is I will never do anything that would risk my customer saying that John, he sold me a box of rocks, because my reputation will go forward. And especially in government, they talk, they will
They
tell
talk.
each other,
They
they
will
go to
tell each other.
conferences together, they, they're at the Capitol together, and somebody's going to say, yeah, that guy, and you'll be burned across all of government at one time, right? I mean, it's very tricky. But yeah, I mean, um, you've got to think about that. It never
Yeah,
offer, just always consider whatever you put down in writing literally
that is,
becomes public information.
yes,
Anything.
assume that. Yeah,
Anybody could do, it's called a FOIA, or a Freedom of Information Act. Anybody can ask for a copy of the emails, the contract, anything that has been recorded or written down or anything. Anybody can ask for that.
absolutely. And hence why, John, you and I prefer using our personal emails to talk to each other, right? That's when the fun starts. I'm with you. But John,
Yeah.
this is actually very interesting because when you talk about government, right? Government has this persona. Also, the biggest deals come from government, right? I mean, I just look at the $1 billion this came out, $2 billion this come out. They're always the big numbers that come out from there. If we were to now move forward a bit, right? I would like to understand, sir, if there's a frame of how to become skilled. So there's this general things we teach salespeople, right? Listen more, talk less. This, are there like some guidelines? If I were to force you and I say to you that you have got 30 minutes, John, to talk to the best to the top 100, I want you to give them two messages that would help them understand and become better at government sales. What would those two tips look like and sound like, John?
Oh man, I think you've got to understand. I can't put enough stress on understanding the personas within the agencies and the WIFM for each one of them, because
Yes, yes,
literally
right.
every single opportunity I've ever been involved with is a committee buy. And again, any one of those people could kill it at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
you've got to get your champion to introduce you. And that's like we talked about earlier. If your champion is not willing to do all those introductions,
Then
it's not even a real deal, right? I mean,
so,
you might as well.
so, John, at the same time, earlier you mentioned that Deepak, the lay of the land is so complex that if you think it's just one or two people, John, is there a stylistic way in which you would say there's a way to figure out this circle of influence or this inner circle or who really matters? Because otherwise, there's lots of noise. Is there any tips, guidance for you as to who really matters? Now, I know that you're going to tell me, Deepak, champions matter. How do I
Yeah.
identify a champion and how do I identify other people that may not be champions but are part of the formal or informal setup there? Are there any tips, tricks in that? What should I look around for? What signs should I look around for?
Well, I think you have to. I think every company, any GovTech company, tends to at least have a product that fits into a specific agency, and so you
Okay.
have to become sort of a master at understanding in one of those agencies who are all of the people that are in play, right? And you
Yeah.
have to know that you've got to have an introduction to someone in contracts, someone in procurement. If there's an elected official, where do they play into it? What are
Yeah.
the other staffers? And I know I keep going back to prosecutors, but there literally are people that I think I would win often. I mean, I did. I know I win. I've
Yeah.
won on the person that nobody even knew existed, right? In a
Right.
prosecutor's office, there's somebody called a victim advocate. And a victim advocate
Oh,
is someone who is helping victims, making sure they understand how court's going to work, what their rights
the
are,
rights are. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
how they can be, what kind of things the prosecutor can do, or the city or county or whatever. And
Mm.
guess what? I've had multiple deals where they are the ones that told the elected prosecutor, this is the software. And do you know why? Nobody understood how complicated the reporting was for them to the feds. And it was so important to get that reporting correct because
Right.
remember when I said grants are something that drive an
The
agency?
drive.
The feds would apply or give a grant to the agency based on the reporting that victim advocate had to do. And so the victim advocate could be the victim advocate because their job is very important, could be the one to say, no, it doesn't do what I
No, it
need.
doesn't do. Yeah.
Or they could be the one to say, that is exactly what I need. And
That's
it
an
could be that one person that everybody has sort of overlooked because, oh, they're just a victim advocate.
no, no.
And they
I,
could
I,
be the one
I,
to
I,
kill it.
I love what you said there, and I think there's a lesson for people listening in. Identify someone whose use of your solution can actually be extremely meaningful because that is a great user case, use story. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. If I go back to one of the things that I used to watch my sales leadership do when I was at HP and so on was that the way they would position it, you would always have them positioning to someone in the room, two or three people that would always lean forward when they got to a certain point because they had already understood what and how they use the system and then reveal it to them how it makes your life, that whiffum thing that you spoke about, right?
With them.
When you
Yeah.
put all this together, it makes a lot of sense. John, what I wanted to do now was kind of as we wrap up, I really want to get an opportunity to actually understand. You did give the rationale for why you went and created Energize GTM, right? What I want you to do is kind of help me understand what problems are you really keen on solving out there, what type of things should people bring to you, and who exactly are the type of people that you would love to talk to, deal with, do business with.
Wow, that was a lot of questions, and I can't remember the
I know
order
I
of them.
can't resist. I just, I like I said, I adore entrepreneurs. I know the challenges they have. So essentially, all I'm saying to you, boss, is just you just rattle off. Why should someone?
Yeah,
What pain can you solve for them? Why should they call you? That's essentially what I'm giving you an opportunity to
yeah.
talk about, John. Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
I started off with who I've got a passion for, right? Or those small GovTech SaaS companies.
Yep.
The things I tend to help them with are some of the stuff that we're talking about. That because again, they don't really come from a sales or a marketing background.
Yes, correct.
What some people might think very basic, but it is that okay. Let's get very narrow on the ICP. Don't just say all cities because you're going to be all over the place, right? Focus in and say our solution, maybe it's just today, but our solution is really
Is
proven for small cities, let's say. Chase those
yeah,
small cities. Don't get wrapped up in, medium or even big. I think the other thing that you take one step below that I think I see a lot too is that persona definition. Who are all the people within that agency that
yes,
could make or break this opportunity? And know what's important to them. Know they're with them, right? Because there will generally be some sort of themes that go through all of them.
yeah.
And then we kind of get a lot of it is the outbound part of it, right? How do I build awareness? What is my value prop? How do I message that with them to
So
different people?
when
Because
you say outbound, is this like you helping people set up an SDR or a call out something, emails, infrastructure, stuff like that, or what would it
yeah,
entail?
yeah. So a lot of it is the email infrastructure to some degree, but I also believe there's a lot on the social media side. I find a lot of the people I work with, they don't think LinkedIn, for example, is all that important.
Yeah,
But people are on there. I mean, there's over 1 billion people on LinkedIn today, and
absolutely,
you may
absolutely.
not even know it. And so it's easy today to be present on LinkedIn. There's lots of tools out there that'll help you write content. I would say most content is not meant to be a sales thing. It's meant to build authority in that.
Authority. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely,
don't get
John.
hung up in the, hey, come do this. Hey, come. You should never be talking about yourself, quite honestly, right? Push them maybe to your website, or, maybe you have a lead magnet that is a one pager that helps them or something like that.
Yep.
But I think
Yep.
it's still important. You have to do multi-channel. And so I tend to help them with, again, the email infrastructure, which most people have no idea how complicated that is today, to do
Because
good.
even I'm struggling, John, to be honest with
Yeah,
you. My returns over the last 2 years have been, I've gone from literally single digits performance for at least responses back to like the 0 point type of setups. And I
yeah,
think it's a lot of things that are going on there. But coming back to you, John, if I
yeah,
understand you clearly, let's say, let's draw a scenario here. If I have a customer who is, like I mentioned, to a $10 million company that has got, let's say, 4 or 5 customers, and all in defense. They want now to go to the next level, and they say to John, give me a model that allows me to double my growth. I want to bring some people on board. What roles should I bring on board? How do I support them? Can you help me set up an RFP process to how to respond to RFPs? How can I productize that process? And can you put together some sort of a strategy that helps me also send a message out there to customers in terms of either collateral or email infrastructure or social media? Is that
yeah.
something that you would say is juicy, Deepak? I want to get my jaws into that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it was something we didn't get to talk about it more. And I don't want to
Yeah.
give you up, but the thing that you said about your wife, you not being a plumber and you not being an electrician and stuff like that.
Yes,
I
yes,
learned a long time ago to know where my limits are. And not just my
yes,
limits, but to know something I may or may not enjoy. Right.
yes,
And so
correct.
for me personally, I don't enjoy managing people. I just
Got it.
that's the in I mean, I don't know how else to say that. It's just
Yes,
not something I enjoy. And so I've purposely said, I'm not going to go there. And you and I have talked about this. I've got a client that has said, I can't get my guys to close deals.
to
Well,
close
and I
deals. Yes.
said, Yos, because they're former cops. That's not what they do. And so I enjoy partnerships. And so that's why I talked to you about him saying, look, Deepak, sales and sales training and sales methodology. And I'll come to somebody like you and say, hey, look, I want to introduce you to him. You can help him
You
with
you
that
bring
part.
absolutely,
Yeah. And
absolutely.
so, yeah, I prefer working with partners. And it's actually, interestingly, one of the things I'm working on with some of my clients is I want to build. So it kind of goes back to, just to give some sort of frame of reference, is I worked at Microsoft in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I
Yeah.
think to some degree it's still the same, but it's very partner driven, right? It's all about
The
helping partners help Microsoft. And
Microsoft,
to
and
me
I
that,
think 70% of the revenue is still channel, isn't it? Something like that.
yeah,
Some
it's
massive
channel. And
number.
so I've
Yeah.
always been a big fan of partnerships. And so I'm building something with my clients and others to say, look, I can go into an agency and I may not have that product that they need for another department
But
potentially. But you know what?
yeah,
I know somebody that I trust, that I know is doing well. Let me introduce
correct.
you. And I'll tell you, that's another thing. And I think this is general, but it definitely is good in government agencies, is to say, hey, let me be the person to help you move around, right? Help another department, because they want it simple too. They want somebody that can say, yeah, I know somebody within X state that does that thing, right? And so
But
being sort of that
John,
matchmaker
there's
is
something
important.
that something just entered my brain, and you know me,
Yeah,
John. There's no ways we can close this conversation without you and I having a conversation. When I met you, you were actually deep in use of AI in a lot of things, right? We've just had a conversation. I know people think of government as some dinosaur, but government is also making huge moves in investing in AI, and techniques and tools and predictive analytics and so on and so on. From your own perspective, if I am a salesperson, and I'm not going to ask you the childish question that, John, is AI going to take my job? I'm not going to ask you that question, John. What I would like to ask is as follows: as you see this landscape changing, and as you pick up the newspaper and see or headlines and you see Oracle dumped 30,000 people globally just 2 days back, those are horrendous, and these are our brethren because we come from the high tech, right? I'm ex HP Sun Microsystems, and we read these headlines and we're like, wow, that's cutting pretty deep and fast in. as you stand here and you look at other salespeople that are listening to this podcast, what advice would you give them in terms of how to adopt AI, how to encourage the use of AI, how to gain augmented intelligence from AI, and not fall into the trap of using it for some of the Mickey Mouse stuff, such as, hey, help me write an email to my customer, stuff like that.
Yeah.
John, what's
Yeah.
your nuanced approach on this? What would you say to people listening in on AI?
Yeah, for personal use, I think in sales, I think one of the most powerful things you can use it for is prospect research. There's
Yeah.
there's just so much data out there. I I use Claude for the most part, and they have projects, and I've created a project
Yes.
that is incredibly complex with the instructions in that project, but I can just put the name of a person, say a founder and his company, and I get paid back a multi-page document about him, about his company, what he's done, what the company's doing, and everything. So from a sales perspective, I think that's what you should be doing. Don't I mean, writing an email is a good thing, but at the end of the day, quite honestly, people know what's written by AI and what's not written by AI
That's true.
at the
That's
end of the
true.
day.
Absolutely,
On the
John.
other
I
side, you
mean,
said something that I think is important too when it comes back to government agencies. One thing that I don't, people probably don't really think about too much is almost, I would say probably every agency today never has enough staff. Never, ever. They never have enough budget to hire
yeah,
enough people to
absolutely.
do what they need to do. And so
Yep.
agencies are out there looking for ways that AI can help them cover the bases, if you
Cover the,
will,
yep, absolutely.
for everything that they need to do. Because again, if you think about it, every citizen is going to complain about government's not doing that for me, and government's not able to provide that to me, and government can't, give me this information,
Correct.
and stuff like
One,
that.
yeah.
So yeah, so I think
So,
that's another AI use on the government agency side.
so now for those people that are scared that AI is going to take their jobs, John, what advice would you give a salesperson to adopt AI? Clearly, you said use it for the bigger issues, right?
Yeah,
One of the things that blew my mind is that I actually also see the misuse of AI. And John, this one I just want to share with you, it'll blow your mind, is that I'm actually sitting with a GovTech guy, and they've taken all the RFPs and put them into Claude, and they are actually asking Claude, this is the response that we're putting in. Go back and map it to the winning deals which they have indexed, right? And tell me where we weak, where we are strong, and so on, so on.
yeah,
He then actually let slip out of his mouth that we have also loaded some of the competition's RFPs.
of course,
And I said,
absolutely,
okay, great idea,
because
but just
because you can learn how they won.
how correct. So I asked
Yep.
him a question: is that what's the intent? And he said the intent is to actually learn, close the gap. And I said, okay, can I ask you what rules you apply? Is it very clear that this is at the end of the day? So here's one thing that I told him to do, and I said, okay, can you just ask it from find the top 5 case studies that I should include in my RFP response. And when he did that, John, believe it or not, one of those cases was from the competition. The
Yeah.
AI, and I knew this was going to happen because that's where AI is sharp, but not that sharp. It actually created a scenario based upon his competition's case study that was in there, and adapted it by its own rationale too, and completely created a. So he got this case study and he said to me, "This is awesome. This is awesome." And I said, "Okay, would you validate that all 5 are absolutely?" Then he got stuck. He's like, "This one is interesting. I've never seen this one before."
Yeah.
Then the only learning from that was very simple. You need to not lose control of the process. And I think that's very important, right, John? That
Yeah.
You have Claude projects, but you also know when Claude is giving you information that doesn't make sense because you have that intuition that tells you this case study reads different. Then you realize that it was masked, by the way. So, but when they unmasked it, they actually realized it was not even the case study, it was the competition's case study. So from an AI point of view, they mastered and published it. The AI did not know the nuance of. So,
Yeah.
but John, AI is going to be one of those things that I'm going to keep an eye on because, to be honest with you, I look at LinkedIn right now, and I am deeply disappointed. I wake up every morning to at least see 6 salespeople putting up their hands asking for help. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know if the algorithm is decided to upset me early in the morning, but oh my god, I literally I was telling my wife, my god, I'm swallowing hard here because I know what's happening. And when you have such a large quantum of people out there, and this is what I think people need to understand, AI used judiciously can also make you different in the market space that you are in. And if you
Yeah.
feel that you need to position yourself differently, feel free to do that. Now, John, before we go into our
Hey,
routines,
Deepak,
yeah,
real quick,
sorry, please go
I
ahead.
just
Absolutely.
because you were talking about what many call hallucinations, right? That whole idea that
Mhm.
AI makes stuff up, infers different stuff. I'll share it with you, and if you want to share it with the audience, I think it would be great. I've got a whole very long, what I call, I can't remember what I call it, but basically, it's a way to get rid of the hallucinations. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
some rules
If there
that I
is,
set up.
is that you put into the prompt or something to kind of
Yeah, it's
restrict
at the
or
end
make
of
it.
every one of my prompts that
Yeah.
are rules that says, if you can't verify it, let me know. If
And you
it,
know why, John? I knew you would have something like that. It's because
oh,
the
I
way
call it
you
the
were
reality filter. That's what I call it.
the way you were talking about Claude and projects, the way your eyes lit up, I felt that I found a kindred spirit because I also love it when Claude and I argue. Or like just this morning, my son was telling me, "What are you writing to ChatGPT?" I said to ChatGPT, "This has to be the dumbest thing I've heard you say. Are you, what's wrong with you? Can you imagine me taking this information and just publishing it as it? I'm reading this and I'm telling you this is wrong. You've
Yeah,
understood the concept the wrong way." And my son says, "Surely writing like that doesn't help." I said, "Believe it or not, when I used to be polite, it didn't listen to me. But when I'm impolite, it does go back and look at things differently." Now, I did not know how to explain that. Was it just devil's advocate or being harsh forces it to do it? But what we could do, John, is just for the audience, right? I typically do a write up. John, feel free to give me your information, put it
I
onto your
will.
website so I can link it back to your website. I will and put your website down. Now, John, before we run off into the wilderness, sir, could you tell me how people can find you?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. So LinkedIn is just simply John Kitsmiller. You can see it in the thing there. Uh, the website is easy. It's energizegtm.com. I've got a blog there that with all kinds of extra stuff. Some of my sort of long form content. I also have a newsletter on LinkedIn called the GovTech and Legal Tech GTM Weekly. And so every week I throw out a post there, digging into something like recently it was the small city versus large city logo kind of a thing, and why to
In
avoid that
fact,
and stuff like
in
that.
one of your blogs, you spoke about what was it? Remind me, the blur, right? There was something about the blur. I'm trying to remember what was it about.
I've
Yeah,
done a lot of them, so I don't
yeah, you've done
remember.
you've done a lot of stuff on blurring out. But there was this interesting, and I'm trying to look at my notes here to see if I can find it because I actually read some of your blogs, and there was something you wrote about it. And I'll come back to you as when I pick it up. But there was something very interesting that you wrote that I really wanted to dig into, but we were having such a great time that I didn't get into it. But it was about a blur, and I was like, anyway, don't worry. Maybe, oh yes, committee buying and the problem of blur.
Yeah, yeah,
There was
because
something you
you,
mentioned about that. Yeah, you're selling to a group of people, and there was something about you saying the problem of blur. So when
yeah,
you said that blur word, I just couldn't resist. I'm like, yeah, I remember reading one of your blogs on that one, or one
yeah.
of your LinkedIn posts.
It goes back to that whole committee buy, and some people just go right past people
And
that
that's the
are
blur
going to
that
be
you're
able to
referring
seal
to
their
in
deal.
your LinkedIn
Yeah,
post. Got it. So,
yeah, yeah.
John, we have your email address. You are keen to get people to subscribe to your LinkedIn newsletter. I will include your LinkedIn. I will tag you in any case when this comes out.
Yep.
We're going to release this hopefully in a week or so. John, I really appreciate you coming on board. I wish you all the best as you grow your organization and as you get more customers. I really hope that people listening in can get tremendous value. And feel free, people, to reach out to John. He's a great guy. DM him if you
Would
have any questions on your mind. He'll be
would
more
love to
than
help.
happy
Yeah.
to answer. He would love to help. I have known John John roughly 9 months now. That back and forth,
Yeah,
and I
at
think
least, yeah.
these yeah. So there are a bunch of people online, I think, that are very helpful, that share information and stuff. John's one of those guys. Please reach out. Industry stalwart, and as he put it, he knows his niche upon niche upon niche. So this
You
is
got to
a
niche down.
sliver
You
of
got to
greatness.
niche down. You
Absolutely,
got to be
we
the
gotta.
expert so you can talk the language. Yeah, absolutely.
So John, thank you very much, sir. I'm going to bid adieu. Take care, boss.
All right.
Bye bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.